Okay then, so today we're playing with needles. Anyways, so if you're watching this, you have probably had some issues with getting either your testosterone or your estradiol out of the vial. This is most commonly happening to folks who are just getting on injections. Sometimes, whether you've given injections with other medications or not, hormone therapy can be a little bit different. The consistency is different, storage and everything like that, than say something like insulin that's very watery, whereas this is very oil-based. But anyway, so the end result is, let's say you're trying to get your medicine out of the vial and into your syringe, and you're just having trouble doing it. These are going to be some tips and most common things I see people do that can hopefully be avoided. So number one thing, keep in mind, this medication, whether it's E or T, they are very, very thick. They are oil-based. So whenever you're trying to pull them out, think of it like if you were to get a straw and you're sucking water up through a straw. Pretty easy, right? Well, then try sucking oatmeal up through a straw. It's pretty hard. Similarly, whenever you are trying to draw through a tiny needle, the testosterone or estradiol, it's going to be very thick and very difficult to pull up. So it's not going to be something where you just stick the needle in and you go whoop and there it goes right up into the syringe and you're all good. Woo! That's just not how this works. So number one thing is patience. Whenever you are drawing up and you have your needle in there, you are probably going to need to hold it back with tension and just wait. You'll have your vial up here, upside down, and you're just holding so that the suction in here is doing its job, and you will slowly see a drip, drip. I mean, it's slow. You're gonna be there a hot minute. Anyway, so do know that it is not a quick process generally whenever you're trying to draw this medication up. Another thing is to do make sure that your vial is upside down. Let me just mimic that. So whenever you are drawing your medicine up, you should put it on a firm surface, boop, and you're going to go into the top, boop. So you go in like that, but then you need to make sure you invert it so that the vial is upside down. And then where your needle tip is here, and this is just a fake vial, air is the only thing in it, but you want to be sure wherever the liquid is that's in this vial that your actual needle tip that's in there is underneath the liquid, because sometimes I'll see folks who have, you know, the liquid is right here, but their needle tip is obviously a little bit higher, you know, than the actual liquid, and so whenever they're trying to draw, they're just drawing air. So do make sure your needle tip is in the liquid. That's just one of those things that it happens. What are you gonna do? You figure it out, you move on with your life. Anyway, so another thing to make sure of whenever you're getting ready to draw up is going to be your actual needle. You see where the little plastic thing is here that's connected on the syringe. Let me put my little cap back on so that I don't end up stabbing myself. But anyway, whenever you pull it out of the package, and your needle and syringe may not look exactly like this, but whenever you pull it out of the package, you're going to want to make sure that this is connected really well onto this. So I have a lure lock type syringe and needles, meaning they twist on together. And there are some that are kind of like they stick on. I don't recommend those with hormone therapy because of how thick the medication is. So it's going to create a lot of pressure whenever you're trying to suck up, but then worse is whenever you're trying to push out the medicine, it's going to create pressure and possibly push that needle right off the end. Not great. Much better to have a lure lock and twist them on together. So whenever it comes in the package, you know, it usually comes stuck on like this if you have the kind that comes together. Some come separately, needle and syringe, and in that case you're putting it on yourself. But whenever it comes stuck on like this in the package, taking it out, first thing you want to do is grab this and tighten it together. You want to make sure these two are tight together. Mainly because whenever you are drawing up the medicine, if this is a little bit loose, like not loose enough to where it's going to come off, but just loose enough to where air can escape from the base, not great when you're trying to pull here and you want the suction to be here at the needle tip, but there's air coming here, and so you're just sucking air from the base of the needle also, and so you're not really getting great suction through the medication. So twist the tip. Remember that. You want to have your vial upside down, the needle tip under the liquid, and you also want to twist the tip. Those are two top tips that I see people run into all the time that really seem to help out. Anyway, and then keeping in mind that this stuff is very thick and it takes forever to draw up. Anyways, moving on. Another question is, what size needle are you using to draw your medication up? Some people like to do a technique where they use what we call a drawing needle. So they use a separate needle to pull the medicine up with, and then they take it off and put a different needle on to actually inject the medication with. This is not necessary to do, but a lot of people find it useful, especially if they're giving something like a subcutaneous injection to where the needle is going to be much thinner, meaning it will be like sucking through an even tinier straw, even more difficult. And so, you know, sometimes if you're working with an intramuscular needle, those sizes usually run about between a 21 gauge, and that's what I mean by size, not length of needle. I mean the gauge, which is the diameter, the inside bore of the needle. You know, how thick the inside of the straw is, so to speak. You know, if you get a milkshake straw, it's got a big old hole. If you got a Diet Coke straw, it has a lot more pressure in there, and it's more difficult to pull up thick liquids through something that's got the little bitty diameter. Anyways, so generally speaking, intramuscular is going to involve a 21, 22, 23 gauge, 25 gauge. The higher the number, the thinner the diameter. So a 25 gauge is going to be the thinnest that I would recommend using for an intramuscular injection. And then subcutaneous is going to be, you can start off with a 25. It's a very versatile size you can use for intramuscular or subcutaneous, but a 25, 27, going any thinner than a 27 is going to lead you into problems with drawing up medication and pushing it out. So I don't recommend really going any thinner in gauge than a 27 gauge needle for subcutaneous. You can try it though, go ahead. But anyway, so sometimes people might want to use a 25 gauge, for example, to do the actual injection with. But maybe that's really annoying to try to pull the medication through that 25 gauge. And so what they do is they take that off and they use something like a 21 gauge, for example, to be able to pull the medicine up with. And so it's got, you know, thicker bore on that 21 gauge. And then when they're done pulling the medicine up, they just pop it off, put their 25 gauge on, and then proceed to do their injection. So definitely check what needle size you have, because if you have something that's very small, it is going to be quite more difficult to draw the medication up with, and a drawing needle might be something you want to look into doing. One last tip here is going to be, you know, oils get thicker, more viscous whenever they're cold, and they get a little bit more thin or less viscous whenever they're warmer. That's not to say to go microwave this stuff, which I did have a patient who did that. Please don't microwave your medicine, dear God. Anyways, so what you can do is take your little vial and hold it between your hands, just kind of, you know, roll it, whatever. If you have cold hands, like mine are usually not body temperature. My hands are usually pretty cold. You know, maybe crook of your elbow, just kind of hold it there, you know, get it warmed up a little bit closer to body temperature. You don't want to like heat it. You know, I've had people who were like, oh, well, you know, I can just hold it up to a heater. Maybe not. I did see somebody had, you know, got a warm cup of water and just sort of bloop, you know, the bottom of their syringe into the warm water, not hot. You don't want to denature the medication, so I mean, that's why you don't want to just get a hot cup of water and throw your medicine in there for 3 minutes or something, because you don't want this medication staying at, you know, 90 degrees or higher for any real like length of time. You just want to heat it up maybe to about like 80, 85 degrees instead of what it's sitting there room temperature at, which is probably going to be somewhere between 65 and 75 degrees. And that's going to decrease the viscosity of the oil medication in here, like I said, whether it's T or E, and it's going to make it a lot easier to draw up. Now keep in mind, whenever you're done warming it up with your hand or the crook of your elbow or your little cup of water or what have you, you do need to go ahead, set it down and draw it up right away, because if you set it down and it cools back to room temperature, then you kind of just wasted your time. Anyway, hopefully those tips will help. Just to recap, keep in mind this is super thick. Hold your vial upside down when you're drawing your medication out. Gravity is your friend, but while you're doing that, make sure that the tip of your needle is actually below the level of the liquid. Make sure when you take your syringe and needle out of the package, if they come attached already, twist it on, make sure it's on there tight. If you have the push-on type, which I do not recommend, still do push it together. You know, you can kind of twist it to get it to go on a little bit tighter. And then check your gauge, your size, which is the diameter, the bore of the needle, that it is, one, appropriate for your injection type, and that it's maybe not too small to really effectively draw up, which, I mean, you can draw the medicine up through something like a 27 gauge. You're just going to be sitting there for minutes, several minutes, trying to get this stuff to draw up, and then warm the medication just a little bit, very slowly, very gently, to decrease the viscosity. Anyways, so hope this all helped. Give it a try. See you later.